I know, Patricia, you had emailed me about it. There is a strength thinking video and a strength coaching sample video. And it's okay if you watch both or one of those. You don't have to watch both of them. So did everybody find that okay and have a chance to watch it?
It was very helpful.
Yeah. Great.
Very, very well done.
Great, wonderful. So then we will go right into our content today. I'm going to open it up with, is there any specific questions or comments from that strength thinking video that you would like to make sure to get addressed?
Well, there was a lot of good discussion in it. I'm trying to remember if there was what questions we had.
In the master slides.
Yes, yes.
The only I do know that you had your on the screen, and maybe it's somewhere and I missed it. You had the very good I always forget what it's called, but it's basically like our involvement.
The ladder.
Oh, the
ladder.
Yeah.
What was that? I'm sorry.
say that again, Nick.
It starts with bull in a china shop.
Yes, and yeah.
What is that called?
The performance ladder.
That you had on a very nice descriptor by each one of those, and I liked that.
That's great. So what we're going to talk about today is we redid a strength thinking worksheet to give you a little bit more application. I just want to make sure it actually loaded on, yeah, so it's now in the download section of session 9. We're going to talk through it with you guys today and then kind of get you a little familiar, because it is a big chunk of content, but it is one you can use for yourself, or you can actually take your employees as you begin to onboard them through this. And that worksheet has that performance ladder with the descriptors. We realized we didn't have that in, I don't know where we didn't have it, but I wanted to make sure it's in your worksheet. So you'll have the first page of the worksheet will be the model, the strength thinking process. The second page will be the performance ladder with those descriptors.
Okay, thank you. Other than that, it was very straightforward. I'll also share with you guys that we introduced the ideas around Strength Finder to our LDI group, Leadership Development Institute, which is our managers and some of the more frontline supervisors. I think it went over really well. The whole day was good. We had to talk about some, their parts of the strategy and everything. But we started with this and kind of rolled out the general concepts. And I explained each of the senior team members and kind of how they fit in, because we knew several of the different theme descriptions applied to them. I think it was really fun. And then toward the end of the day, Pam came back to it and did the stand up if you are crazy aggressive or whatever the term was. That came. And I thought it was a good intro. I think people were kind of intrigued, and it was a good start. And I can talk to you guys offline, or we can talk about it today if you want, related to the evolution of the future program too.
Great. I think that would be great. If we have time, it would be great today. If not, we can certainly schedule a time. Oh, that's exciting. And I do think it's kind of fun to introduce it in a group, and then you can decide if you want to continue in a group setting or if you want to break it down like we've talked about to the one-on-ones. I have a feeling everyone in the room is going to be a little different in the way they roll it out. But what we're going to talk today, after we get through the strength thinking worksheet and kind of get you familiar with how to use it, we'll talk about the nuts and bolts of the 3 stages of intervention of onboarding an employee. So we had talked about giving you some more kind of practical hands-on. It follows, anytime you do an intervention, you've got your 3 stages, just like we covered with the ruts. But this will be, things to kind of consider and get ready and make sure to mention, that sort of thing. All right. So Adam, do you have the strength thinking worksheet?
No, I didn't look for that one. I figured it was in the PowerPoint, but did you save the PowerPoint for today? Because I'm showing that it was last updated on April 3rd.
I did.
All right. So
Okay.
you might have to share screen on your end because it's not showing up in Dropbox.
Okay. Well, I'm going to share my screen, you guys. It's not as neat as Adam's usually is. So we'll get there.
Okay, while she's pulling that up, I'll just tell you, the only reason my screen is any neater is because Felinda made me clean it up. So,
And I've been working on a couple projects and I've got a bunch of stuff open for today.
so let's all make fun of Felinda for this and make her feel really bad.
Because usually I'm the one that's like very
It's all good. I don't think anybody's going to care.
I don't think they will. No.
We won't care, but we'll notice.
That's true. These guys notice everything.
All right, let's actually see if I can just share the worksheet and circumvent them. Can you see this okay?
Yes, and we see nothing else, so your secret is safe.
It worked. All right, so this is the Strength Thinking Worksheet, and it follows exactly the model that we talked over in the video. And this one is so important because it's where you really start to see how these themes fit into the bigger picture, and that you don't even really have to use the themes if you're going to work on something specific with an individual.
Why not? Why don't I have to use the themes? Sorry.
Is this a trick one?
Well, no, I just want you to explain what, because I mean, that's a surprising statement. Like, we're teaching a course largely around StrengthsFinder, but now we're saying, if technically speaking, you could use this without the themes.
Yes. Well, I'm happy to let you talk about that, but I will explain why. You can still isolate that activity. You can still assess where they are on the performance ladder and where you'd like them to be. You know, maybe that particular activity, they're at a basic level and you know that, they just need to acquire some knowledge and improve their skills. Now, having the themes is going to help you be more directed and probably improve their engagement and their performance faster. Often it's like a multiplier because you are individualizing it, but you can skip that step. I wouldn't want to skip it entirely. You could still consider their talents, even if you don't know, their top 5. You probably would be observational at some point about what you do see are talents in their behaviors, but you could just still isolate that activities, figure out the knowledge that you think they need, help them cultivate the skill and coach them through that process. And that is extremely useful. So we just want to make sure you feel like you're not completely dependent upon the StrengthsFinder. It's an extremely powerful tool, but it's not the only one out there, and it's by no means obviously necessary in this process. Adam, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I wanted to ask how this sounds to the group, if it A, makes sense, and B, if you like it.
It makes sense.
So in full disclosure, I listened to the video and it's on my tiny phone as I'm driving and I can't study it. It was really small on my screen. So I heard you talk about it, but I wasn't actually able to see it. And I'm trying to figure out, where does this start and where does it end? I'm sorry. And I'm sure I'm the only one that doesn't know. It starts at the very top and isolating an activity like cooking or whatever.
Correct.
It goes
I did
across.
find that, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think you're alone in that, Nick. It's a big chunk. There's a lot going on here. And this, I believe I said this somewhere in the video. This, if I didn't, I'm going to say it now. Here is the reason there isn't an assessment to measure activities. Activities are endless and they're nuanced. And so they include all of these things. You may be great knowledge, but maybe you don't have the talent, or maybe you just have both of those things and you haven't cultivated the skill. So ideally you would do these in order, starting with isolate activity, and you would go through the steps of isolating the activity from left to right, and then you would look at the talents, same thing, kind of going through left to right, asking either these questions in the model or the worksheet kind of gives a little bit more context. Then you aggregate the knowledge. same idea, left to right, then you cultivate skill. But let's say a lot of activities don't need this level of depth. We were talking about, so as we begin to record more and more videos, we're working on little, skill sets within that. We don't need to do this strength thinking process in full for something that's like, okay, how do you improve eye contact when you do a video? Adam was talking about that. And we were like, well, we wouldn't need to go through this whole process for that. We already can know how to do it. The knowledge is there. We just need to cultivate the skill of the practice, things like that. So you might find your activity is not as in depth when you're looking yourself, or that when you're working with somebody, you might just find you need to kind of just tap into like, okay, well, I have practiced this, but I actually could go grab a new piece of knowledge. Let me focus on that line and help me through the process of that. Does that answer your question?
And I think there's a lot to this too, so I want to say a few things as well. So the first thing is isolating the activity is really essential to this. If I want to change performance, I need to know in what area. Also, this is the difference between a theme of talent and a strength. So a strength is not just a mature theme. A strength is a level of performance within the activity. So without activity, you don't know anything. You don't know how to apply your themes. You don't know what knowledge is needed. You don't need general global knowledge. You need knowledge around a specific activity. You don't need general skills, globally applied skills. You need specific skills related to the activity. So the one step that matters most is the most boring probably, and that is really identify the activity that would produce the results you're looking for. And that's what you're trying to improve your performance on, and maybe you'll develop it up to the level of strength. But as we've said many times, strength is just one level of performance. Maybe advanced, or competent, or even basic is the performance you're going for. Now, the next three steps of, if you want to go back to you could use this too, or this model here. Mature talents, aggregate knowledge, cultivate skill. Those actually could be done in any order. So maybe you only need to focus, as Felinda said, on cultivating skill. You don't need to worry about knowledge is fine, and use of talents is fine. So you might just cultivate skill. You don't have to go through the blue and the red to get to the purple. You do need to get through the yellow, though. You need to isolate that activity. If you want to talk about performance and improving it. Now, if you just want to talk about themes and how to use themes, which is where everybody in the StrengthsFinder world is, they just talk about themes, and they do something really unhelpful. They will talk about strengths, but they really mean themes. When they're saying strengths, they're really talking about themes. They have no distinction between themes and strengths. So what's different about what we teach and what we think is really the right method is to know the relationship that talent is just one thing that can improve performance. Knowledge is just another thing that improves performance, and skill is just one thing to improve performance. In what? An activity. And that activity could be taken all the way up the ladder, wherever it needs to be on the ladder. So those are the key things that we want to make sure you understand in this. And so Nick, just kind of filling in, does that help you complete the picture too a little bit more? And do you have any questions?
I couldn't read each of these items. Like I heard you describing a process that made sense, and it was just a matter of me. And I didn't realize when I opened this, what you just sent when you loaded it, that you had a detailed description underneath what the questions were. And as I'm looking at this, in my head, I'm applying rolling up StrengthsFinder. What activity, that's the activity in my mind that I'm thinking, it's probably one that we're all thinking, but as you kind of apply an example to this.
That's great.
Great. And actually, that's what we're going to ask everybody to do is and you can kind of brainstorm, think of 3 activities related to your job that you would like to see move up the performance ladder. So if you're already advanced and you want it to become a strength, you're going to identify that activity. Maybe you're feeling that you're at the basic level and you'd like it to be advanced or strength. So I want you to start thinking about that. And Nick, that's a great example, rolling out StrengthsFinder. Now, I'd like to point out that the Match Rate Talents line, that's the COIN model. You've already had a lot of experience with that. That's where the themes plug in: connect, observe, interrupt, and nuance. But that activity of rolling out StrengthsFinder is where you're going to start. And so that would be something like that if you choose to take yourself through that process. I think that that one is meaty enough to really dig deep. You're going to go through, like, we gave you a lot of questions and things to consider that we think are important.
Felinda carved this down a lot. It used to have a lot more questions and a lot more, like, probably unnecessary detail. I say probably because I liked my version, but Felinda really wanted to get more direct. So if you guys are like, this is a lot of questions, it's not compared to what it was.
That's kind of, in a nutshell, what usually happens. So you would just either ask yourself these questions, or this would give you a jumping off place to work somebody through. So we just
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
So notice the difference between what are my 5 themes and what do they mean and what do I do with this information, you know, learning about your 5 themes, compared to saying, how do I apply my themes toward a specific activity, like rolling out StrengthsFinder to our organization? Now you can look at your themes in the context of that specific activity. How will Nick use his woo? How will he use his communication? How will he use his, let's see, I had it right.
No. What's it? Ideation.
Yeah, or his competition or positivity.
Yeah.
Willie Parrots,
Willie
ignore
Parrots.
Calico.
Do you see how it helps you, like, really focus on your themes more tangibly when you look at them through the lens of a specific activity?
Yes.
It's pretty remarkable. And it's like the missing link that so many people in the strengths movement just hadn't thought about. It's not a hidden thing. It's just not all that exciting or appealing, but activity is where it's at. Like, that is what you use to focus your discussions with your employees. It's around the activity and your performance in that activity. And in that way, I think StrengthsFinder is such a great performance development tool, but almost nobody besides us are really talking about it. I haven't encountered anybody else who really comes across, and it's not like we haven't tried to talk to people about it. They just want to see themes as strengths. They just cannot get past that. It's called StrengthsFinder, so themes must be strengths. No, it's the activity. Okay, I'll stop.
Okay. I do think this group is on board. I do.
That was for you, Flynn. I want to make sure you're on board with
I am
me.
100% on board.
We'll see.
All right. So where this would fall, so we're going to use the next example. In rolling out StrengthsFinder to the organization, you would first do your POM. What's the purpose? You know, why do you want to do it? What is the outcomes you're looking for? You would do that. This would fall under methods. So you could use this as a method to really figure out how you're going to do that. And so I would suggest that, and you'll see how that'll fit into the coaching onboarding kind of process as well, is if you're thinking about that in the activity, you still want to know your purpose. You still want to know your outcomes. But here's where you can really say, all right, well, how am I going to take that activity to the next level? How are we going to do this in our organization, and how will I personally be part of that? So that's going to be one of the major pieces of your homework. There's really only 2. It's just taking yourself through this worksheet and answering the questions. And again, you know, if you get into this and you're like, you know what, I mean, we did just redo this recently, so we're willing to refine it and make it better. So if you do catch it, like this wasn't clear, please tell me. I'm totally happy to change it. So I want you to just take some time and go through this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory after you watched the video. But if that's not the case, again, Adam and I are absolutely happy to spend some time, just talking that over. So any questions about that worksheet?
And the homework is to apply to 3 work-related activities we want to improve in.
Ideally, I would pick one, unless you really want to spend a good chunk of time. I mean, it's a very useful tool, and you will have very clear directives of where you want to go with those 3. I'd pick one. I'd like kind of think of 3 and think which is the one that's most important, because usually that will show you where your priorities are, which is one of the steps of the worksheet, your commitment level. You know, sometimes we think we're super committed to something. When we assess our commitment level and what's sort of required to get us to that next level, it starts to be very clear which one is a priority. So sometimes we like to say, like, pick a few and then pick the one you really want to spend the time on. But if you get going and you want to do all 3, yay, great. I'm not going to say no. So, any questions on that worksheet?
And so the activity could be applying StrengthsFinder in the organization.
Yes, it could. You might want to narrow it down to kind of like the onboarding process. Like you might find when you get into it, and it is usually pretty clear, I would say, as you're isolating the activity.
Broad.
If you're kind of starting too broad and you need to narrow it down. Clues to that would be if there's too many steps inside the activity, you might just want to pick out the first most sort of like beginning step and call that your activity that you do. I think you'll know what I mean when you get into it, because you might be like, well, I can't really answer these questions because it's such a huge thing. That means just chunk it down until it's something you really can take action on. I'll give you an example. Like in the video, I use the cooking example, and just general like improve cooking would be way too broad. And so you would kind of just get very specific, like taking, how to onboard the employees this year, or a certain level of employees like the LDI, just play around with it. And if you do get stuck, call me on this one. Because you don't want to get so, like how Adam and I were talking, you don't want to get so narrow where it doesn't feel big enough. And there is this kind of nice window. And it usually is, like I said, becomes pretty clear. Any other questions on that before we move on?
I just want to say too, going through this exercise by going through all 4 areas, activity, talent, knowledge, and skill, that's like doing the whole like soup to nuts version. And I'd like you to do that with one activity, because if you can start to grasp this process, it's going to put you so far ahead of even like certified coaches in terms of how to apply StrengthsFinder. So you don't have to do it perfectly. Just do it and stretch yourself as you go through these questions. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what you guys think of it, because this is where StrengthsFinder, everybody's asking, what do you do with StrengthsFinder? Like, I like it, but what do I do with it? And this is answering that question. What do you do with it?
Absolutely. And I think what you'll also see here is that when you can grab a hold of a personal example, one that has meaning to you, it's so much easier to articulate to somebody that you would like to then onboard as well. You can sort of refer back to that example and that process that you went through and why it mattered. Examples are not to be underestimated in this particular domain. Because there's a lot of really abstract stuff, and I think connecting it into something specific and personal is the way it's kind of like, oh, that's how I'll do it for another person. So any other questions? I don't want to rush us off of this if we...
I do want to show something that I'm looking for the cake metaphor thing, because I think that provides the context. So I just want to show this slide. Here we go. So it really comes down to the strength formula that is in the Gallup books. Like, it's not a hidden thing. A strength is when you have your talents multiplied by knowledge and skill, all within the context of an activity. Talents applied toward the activity, knowledge of the activity, and skill, or the steps in performing that activity proficiently. All of those things is what Gallup says leads to a strength. And of course, your talent are your themes. So you can see, and it's performance in an activity. So that's where you're getting the formula from. That's where our diagram follows this. It's your level of performance in the activity. Gallup calls it strength, but strength is just one level of performance, right? So your performance level in the activity is your use of talent toward that activity times your knowledge in that activity and skill in that activity. So I just want to bring that up to kind of help pull it all together so you see where that's coming from. And the colors coordinate. So there's that too.
So there's that. So I would also like to add, your talent can be a multiplier here. And that's why you want to fit your talents or sort of match them with the activities. If you pick something that you want to move up the performance ladder, but it is just a huge drag on your energy, you sort of eliminate the possibility for that multiplier, and then you're instead spending all this time and energy with very little results and a lot of frustration and wasted time and effort. I mean, wasted resources. So that matching of the talent to the activity, and even the way that you gather knowledge and skill, is so important. And I think that's where our culture does get into like this sort of like, oh, I've got to fix my weakness. I want to get better in this thing, but they don't apply their talents because of some kind of arbitrary reason, like they should do it a certain way, or it's supposed to be something someone does. But if you can do that, you will harness somebody's energy and happiness, and it's just fun to see. So do keep that in mind. And as you're assessing and isolating your activity, you might find that some come up where they're just not a match and you can't seem to work around a fix. Well, then that's a good sign. It might need to come off your plate. So I have done that a lot, and then that just makes room for the things that are multipliers for me. And I have to say I'm much happier for it, and I'd like the same for you. So, all right. Any other questions on this? Okay, we're going to move on to the 3 stages of an intervention, which is essentially the nuts and bolts portion of how you would onboard in this context an individual. We'll do a little bit more with teams, maybe I think it's 2 sessions from now, but we wanted you to have a document, and it is in the download section as well, that just kind of took you through the steps. It's not extremely dissimilar to the RUTS intervention, though that one is in the context of RUTS. This is more about how you would begin to introduce somebody to the StrengthsFinder and how to take them through the process. It's always going to be these 3 stages, ideally. And we like this kind of approach because it gives you a much more flexible way of coming at this. I could tell you like, oh, we have this workshop that you have to give, and it's 45 minutes for this module and 20 minutes for this module, and if you don't give it in that way, there's no that's how it's all been created. We don't like that approach. We actually, sometimes that's useful. We did talk about that a little bit last time. sometimes that's useful to have just to orient a group or get them on board all at the same time to get them started. And honestly, the process of onboarding a group is very, very similar to this with just a few extra pieces. But this, I hope, will meet your needs as you're sort of going through mentally and physically preparing for these sessions. So I'm going to just jump into this, and we're not going to spend a lot of time breaking them down unless you have a question about them. So you're first going to start with your POM. You really hopefully will never get around that, because that will just help you orient what's your purpose, what are your outcomes, why do you want to onboard this set of employees. In this case, we're just going to talk about the individual employee. Your purpose, why is this? Is this an introduction to themes? Is this something they've already experienced and now it's becoming a coaching intervention? Is this a contrast intervention like we've talked about with ruts? Just knowing where you're starting is crucial. And then I'd like you to identify what are some of the outcomes. And you remember when we did this as the group, they do not have to be hard and fast at first. You can refine them later. Brainstorm. What are the outcomes? They usually all actually fall into a pretty logical category. Then you begin your methods. So that's where you're like, okay, I know why I'm doing this. I know what I'm doing this. And here is the way I'm going to do it. So here's where the activities could fall, if you're thinking about that for the worksheet. So when you're working with an individual, you want to first assess the quality of rapport with them. Is there a familiarity? Have you known them and worked with them a long time? If you've worked with them a long time, is there a level of trust, transparency? Do they come to you with problems and successes both? What's the history there? That's important for orienting usually how well this will go. And if you do identify some flags, just think about how you're going to address them with that particular individual. Maybe you spend a little longer on the onboarding process of, this is why I myself took it, this is what I got out of it. The trust needs to be there for this to feel like it's, you remember back to that question of autonomy, right? And you could even think about that, give them the choice. Do they want to do this? You also then want to identify the performance activities related to the individual. So this is in context of the work. And so you want to think about what are some of the performance levels in their job-related activities that you want to either think about giving examples from or eventually working to improve. Maybe they're already good and you want to get them to great. Then you just, the really practical bit, you've got to have them take the StrengthsFinder and provide the results to you. And that in and of itself is not hard, but can be a little tedious if you're doing a bigger group, making sure everybody's taken it. You guys are pretty organized for a group. You got your results to us very quickly, and I have a feeling it won't be as painful for you as it is for some people, but we do have directions in the T2S resource library. Or one person might be in charge of the codes and distributes them and kind of keeps track of that. You want to think about how that's going to happen. If it's just one person, it's pretty easy to purchase a code and pass it on. If you give them the code, you can log in to see if they've taken it. You can see their results. But honestly, it's just easier if they email the results to you. I think, personally. Adam might have a different opinion.
I do, and that's fine. I like buying the codes because then if they buy the codes, if I buy the codes, then I can always go to Gallup website and see their results. And that's just me. So whatever you prefer.
Well, in that though, you don't get a notification that they've taken it.
No,
so that's the only thing that you don't want to spend a bunch of time being like, okay, did they take it? Did they take it? Let me check. Once they email you the results, you can then go in and look if you've bought them the code. Yes, I agree with that. That's just like a little detail in the onboarding process. Then you want to create the relevant reports. So you want to enter the information into the top 5. You all have a document generator account.
Do they all have an account, or is there
Well, it's one account. You have one account. Heather, do you want to say that? Do you want to answer?
It's under my email with a generic, I think it's 1234 password, so that you guys can access that.
Yeah. We figured that would be the easiest way to keep you as an organization together, because you can do a lot of really cool group reports. And so if you all are in the same account, you can start breaking up the teams into groups very easily. And then you can all also, like, maybe someone's not on a direct report, but you're curious and you may need to work with them for some reason. You'll be able to go in and look at that without having to ask the other person, or, you know, oh, what's their top 5. So that's why you all have one, so you can keep it cohesive as a group. So for the individual, you would probably just print out the relevant reports, like the top 5, the signature themes, the theme anatomy. And then this is so crucial right here. Spend some time getting familiar with those reports for that person. Before you meet with that person, sit with that, read through, and see if it rings true to you with your experience. See why that might be. Spend some time thinking about, like, well, what's, how would adaptability and empathy work together, and how might that show up for that person? That's going to go a long, long way.
One of the 2 things I would do there specifically is, one, go, oh, this is that person's themes. What are some examples I've observed that indicate the theme? There's also going to be like, whoa, I never would have thought of this theme for this person. And you can't think of any examples. You're kind of mystified by it. That's where you would want to ask them, help me see how this theme relates. Like if somebody has competition that you would never guess had competition, ask them, how does that operate within them? How where does it show up for them, and let them tell you.
Yeah, I do. I use the "how does this show up for you" question a lot. And can they think of some time, examples in their life where they've really enjoyed, this? And I would usually give them a description if they're not connecting to it, but usually they are, almost all the time, once they understand what it means. And I would ask them to do a little work. We didn't put this in here, but I would ask them to review their reports. You don't have to give them, kind of decide what you want to give them in the session versus what they already have. They already have all the stuff on the Gallup website that they get when they take the test. And I would just have them read through that and pick some things that did resonate for them. And then you want to actually physically schedule the time to talk with them, carve it out, try to keep it as sacrosanct as possible. That shows some goodwill. And that, when you're sort of working with that, that's a good time to secure the permission to coach. Again, the autonomy piece comes in. That, especially if there's been some history where there have been conflict or concerns, you do want to spend a little time making sure they understand what this is, and that, there's some permission to coach inside of that. Then you're going to take some time to choose the models, activities, and worksheets you want to cover. I would recommend no more than 1 major concept per session.
Like what are examples?
Well, I will give an example. So if you're going to take them through the COIN model, just do connect and pick a worksheet. Ideally, they will take that worksheet home and do it, before the next meeting, or they'll get it to you, set some real specific timelines. The more specific you can be, the better. If they don't have a deadline, usually they will not complete it. And if you're worried about that, you could work with them right in the session and do it with them. You could show them your example. You'll just kind of start to see what you mean. So I would only do, COIN for the first meeting, and use it as if it's a monthly meeting that you have, build in some time with that person to take them through the COIN model. The next one would be observe, pick a worksheet, enablers, interrupt, pick a worksheet, ruts, so that you're sort of orienting to how you want to work with this person through the process. Theme anatomy is a good one. Theme anatomy, you could do just the model, or you could actually break it down and talk about like needs and how that shows up. Depends on how much time you have, really. So I would either start with theme anatomy and or coin, and then progress to strength thinking. Strength thinking is better after they understand the themes if you're going to do StrengthsFinder with them. So why not take advantage of the power of the themes to plug into the strength thinking? So that's sort of like, all right, well, I've gotten them through, but we still have these meetings and I want to continue, getting deeper with this person and getting the use out of this tool and helping them. This will last a long time if you break it down. And then prepare the format you wish to present. What I do is I actually just open up, if it's one-on-one in person, have my laptop with my little models on my PowerPoint, and I just show them. But you may want to print some stuff out. Maybe you don't want them to have maybe you don't want your computer in there, or you do better with handouts. That's fine too. But physically preparing that and deciding how you're most comfortable is actually important, even though it's kind of a detail. I'm going to pause, ask for questions.
This is just so you know exactly what we talked about right before we came in today, was sort of the best method to kind of roll this out. Like, how do we do this and all kind of stay on the same path? And not have Activator Heather at phase 12 and we're all at phase 1 or 2.
Well, it wouldn't be near as structured as if Patricia had put the curriculum together for me. It'd be like all over the place.
Well, yeah, and just, since that came up, our thought was maybe you guys could help us decide what the best curriculum order is, because we've got a lot of great information in a relatively short amount of time, considering the number of concepts that you would never inundate like a general employee with. Plus, we all had a basis, most of us had a basis for it to start with. But our thought was like, what do you recommend for session 1? And we're not calling it week 1, we're calling it session 1. Because it may be a monthly thing, or it may be such a simple concept that we would meet with them the next week too. And what are the takeaways from each session? What are the worksheets, or is there a video that any of this relates to that isn't like teaching how to be a strength interventionalist, those kinds of things. And that's sort of what we were thinking would allow this to be really useful, something we could actually roll out because, and Patricia, who's all about thinking about it, but she might be able to tell us what builds on what, but I would have to really dig in to figure out exactly what builds on what, and it would just, y'all could just tell us, like, these are the best steps to go. That's how we were going to suggest.
One thought that Felinda and I had, and then we wanted to maybe talk to you about, Nick, is, what if we created an online class just for not nearly as in depth as all that we're going through, but that somebody takes StrengthsFinder and then now what? And then we actually create an online course that any of your employees could go through kind of on their own, maybe shorter videos, maybe not hour-long videos, maybe keep the videos to like 6 to 10 minutes. And then once they go through that, then they would have already downloaded that knowledge, so that way you can then work with them on applying it.
Right, and then you wouldn't be responsible for, making sure you all have the same content, like everyone would get the same foundation that then you could build on a little easier with the individual and not have to be responsible necessarily for facilitating the content. That's
actually a really interesting idea. Creating a course, and then if you could give us sort of the teacher manual, like, this is the exercise for applying it this week. By the way, I taught a class, finance. It's so easy to freaking teach. You don't even make your own test. You push a button and it grades it. It's ridiculous. Anyway, yes.
Okay. I absolutely think we could do like a teacher's guide or facilitator's guide. And then they would bring, these completed worksheets to you, and then you could just spend a lot more time with that individual in the context of what you want to do with this with them. But To answer your question, I do theme anatomy first as an introduction, and then I take them through the stages of COIN. That's usually how I onboard somebody. But yeah, I think there's some merit to more conversation around what might be useful.
And I guess I'm trying to remember. I mean, COIN kind of takes them through those exercises where, like the one you had us do, like connecting it all, I guess.
Yeah, the mnemonic.
Pretty much every worksheet you've done up to this point.
It's in there.
Yeah. Just kind of going back through this master PowerPoint thing, the 90 slide one, it takes you kind of the order that we went through, and it has the worksheets and stuff that we did with each. Yeah.
Let me look. I have that downloaded. It's called Master.
Yeah. I mean, kind of you can almost break this up into.
Because I went there for where I got the beginning of my presentation.
Oh, yeah, with the horses.
And what do you think is a reasonable time frame for everybody in here? I mean, she said, what, 10, 15 minutes or 20 minutes?
So for videos?
Yeah, for staff.
I think no more than 15 minutes. And I say that because you really want it to be 10. And if you've got some amazing concept, 15. And I say that because y'all are super passionate, as all of us are, but your average employee will want to kill themselves if we get all down the road of, these concepts and philosophies of what Clifton meant when he started it. They don't care, even though we do. So that's what I thought.
Well, absolutely. That's what you mentioned something a few minutes ago of like the average employee would not get this much content. That is absolutely true. It's a much more surface level, just because if you're going to work with somebody on this, you do need that depth. If you're just introduced to this and it's kind of your beginning entry into it, you don't need that level.
I don't know if they will appreciate a lot of theory to begin with. And so for the employee level, I don't want to say keep it fun, but keep it fun because that way they'll stay engaged with it. Otherwise, they'll be like, I totally watched it. Or they'll do like the old, have it playing while they do everything else, and then they can say they listened to it. Not that anyone here's ever done that.
Yes, we absolutely hear you. And I think that's something if we do decide to do it this way, we can work with you all on it. You can watch it. These, the shorter videos are not hard to remake. So we can make sure they do meet the needs and kind of have that feel. I'm speaking for Adam, but I'm happy to do that because we want it to work. So.
Well, and then, going back to the part of the facilitator guide, we can either give them these questions to look for so they don't fake watch it, not like what color was Adam's shirt, but more like of the 4 slices of avocado they discussed, which was your favorite? More like that. Like they're kind of listening, so like, damn, I got it. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, we can actually build those forms into the modules so that they can fill it out right there and their answers get submitted. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, like Fiber's Ed.
Or if you just don't even tell them to do a worksheet, but at the end of the video or somewhere in the video, it tells them to do this worksheet. So then if they show up with the worksheet completed, then they watched the video.
Yeah, so we'll let you recommend whatever you recommend. It applies to managers and it applies to some frontline staff. As far as who we apply it to, our thought was for the people in this room, it might be great. And I welcome conversation from, Lisa and Chris and Karen in particular, because you have people reporting to you that aren't managers necessarily. But our thought was, rather than buying 220 strengths, tests, theme anatomies, we might start with what we have, which our hands are full at this point. We've got about probably 50 people that have taken, 40 people that have taken this in the organization already, and we got to do something with that. Otherwise, it's like, oh, how great that you had me do this. You never came back to it. So we all just kind of go one level down with whoever that is. So for Chris, it might just be your leads, as opposed to the entire department. Or you may be like, it's not that many people, I can do it. But by them setting it up, not as week 1, week 2, but as session 1, session 2, whatever that is. So if you want to do it with your team, you're going to have some one-on-one time. But if you want to do it at your every other week team meetings, that's a great opportunity to do session 1. That was kind of our thought.
I agree with that, because I think what's important in an organization is that it be organic to the department, that it work for, not everybody meets in the same structure, and not everybody has, it's weekly or it's bi-weekly or it's monthly. Everybody knows what that department can absorb, and if you have a structure you can plug into it, great. You can, but I do think it's important to be able to spread it out to your own timeline. And I personally, though I think, time will tell, I do think kind of doing a smaller group to begin and kind of it helps with the onboarding process. It just starts to get people interested and excited, and you have to do a little less work to sort of get people interested in taking it. They hear someone else talking about it. By the time they finally get to take it, they know what it is, or they are familiar enough to where it's not just this, oh, hey, I'm supposed to go do this thing. So I do think doing it with that smaller group and kind of deciding 40, 50 people to start is a good idea.
And the other thing that we welcome your thoughts on relate to, like, in terms of maintenance. So some of the lessons we've learned, like with other initiatives, I can't think of the acronym for now. Help me out. AIDIT, thank you, AIDIT. Like for that, we rolled it out, and I think it was a really awesome rollout. We had every single employee do it, and it was something we could teach, and it's a skill they have. It's awesome. And then we were pretty good at saying, like, are you, Chris, manager of imaging, like are you following up with your people? Are you listening to them? When we did that. But like all initiatives, like it kind of faded. And so it's still like on the eval, like, are they using AIDIT? I don't know if the managers just check, like, yeah, they're using it. Or if they really are listening to them and judging that they did it. And so for us, how do we keep this fresh? Because what's going to happen, like at a certain point, Karen is going to go run the Memorial Hermann system, and we're going to have to replace her. And how do we, like, what do we do with the people? Like they're on session 7, and and then they're getting a manager that's never done this. So manager so does somebody else step in? Like it gets real, like from a maintenance standpoint, how do we maintain it?
Yeah, well, we are trying to address it. It kind of goes to what we are what's in development for us is a standalone. So the first was the idea of the standalone foundations course, so that exactly that, you hire somebody new on the front line. You might not necessarily, with all the training and all that, everything, have time to take them through, but you can give them that to watch and sort of get it in there, and they will get the same content that someone got 2 years before. And then we thought, okay, well, this level needs that as well, because it's great that we have you guys in the room, but what if you hire somebody else that needs to be on this level as well? You're not going to want to set this all up again. You've already done it. So we are developing that level of course as well, like Train the Trainer for strength-based organizations as a standalone course. So then I think what you would do is just have them take that and explain to him or her, how you're using it in the organization and kind of what they're expected to do with it. But then they have that level of knowledge that everyone else does. And I think that's pretty crucial if you're going to maintain it. I do think that building in over the course of time, kind of like, all right, we'd like to take everybody through this, get them through the COIN model and the application of it. And then, the next year, like, keep it in the language, keep it posted, keep it circulating. Think of like, okay, now we've done this, we've completed that. Here's a next level initiative. We can introduce like a communications, strength-based communication. There's a lot of ways you can keep the language and the information and just apply it to something else that's useful. So that's an idea. I mean, there's a lot of ideas, and some of them will stick and be great, and some of them you'll be like, oh, maybe not. That might work, it might not. So we can keep talking about that, because I agree. I think it's important when you're building a strength-based organization to plan for the long term.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I may be paraphrasing, like, I love the idea of a foundations course that just like everybody deserves. I don't want to skip over the fun, happy, joyous introductory period the initial rollout that you talked about, because that's what makes you fall in love. And then you might have tracks, right? You might have a track that is leader, or interventionist is maybe a better term, and then, like your employees, if you will, because the leaders do need a higher, deeper level of knowledge that may not be a 10-minute session, but maybe more like a 30-minute kind of. That way, they're getting a deeper knowledge so they can apply these things in their departments, and not have all their employees know more than them. And it's not to say you have to be a leader to be an interventionist, but it's going to be a little awkward if you're coaching your boss on, they need to wrangle in that ideation.
Yes.
Although I will tell you, I think that that's a sign of a really healthy organization. My students, high school students, will reel in my ideation specifically, and I love it. I love that they're as excited about it, and that they're reminding me how to be a better, mentor for them. I don't take it personally, or I don't feel one-upped by some high school kid, but I love that they're enthusiastic about it. Anyway, the first step really is this. What we're doing now is making sure, you want to talk about making it stick. If you all as a group don't buy into it, then there wouldn't have been any point of like rolling it out further. So really, I think it's you all making the call. Hey, yeah, if we can roll this out the right way, we want more of this in our organization. It's going to make things, performance conversations, easier to talk about. It's going to help people be seen for who they are, and more transparency. Like, all of these are going to be great for us. We want it. Something like that. I mean, that's really what this is about, is Felinda and I are totally rolling out everything for you to experience.
Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
I'm done. That's it.
Well, absolutely, because there's different levels, like you were saying, kind of going back to that. It's like you want the foundations course and you want everybody to have that. But once you've had the foundations course, you're going to have like managing others, where maybe just, managers have enough of what they need to build on the foundations course. And then you might have kind of this, strength-based organization, which is a lot like what you guys have, but will be even more tailored. And that would be that next level of interventionist. So it's something, you can think about leveling so that you can kind of plug in the right, like that level of employee to the correct support. So that's something to consider as well.
I also want you guys to be thinking about not just the coursework, but actually things like in your newsletter, feature one of the themes, and then everybody in the hospital that has that theme might get listed below it, and then the next issue, the next theme, and we have all sorts of materials like that we can supply you with. It would be having things like posters up around. Yeah, we're like the visuals. You can have a spinny wheel of.
So it's absolutely why we do the visuals that are eye-catching, because it does cement the learning, but it keeps it exciting and fresh. I think that's one of the biggest reasons personally that initiatives go a little stale, is that there's no visual component, or if there is, it's very tends to be very kind of like corporate colors, or it's not engaging. So that's one of the reasons we push that quite a bit. And and you can. You've got the poster in the resources, the 34 that's behind me, and the individual theme ones, so you could think about where to post those. Highly recommend encouraging people to post their top fives near their workstations if appropriate. I know that wouldn't be appropriate in some scenarios, but so that people can see it and look at it and think about it when they're talking to that person. We have, all kinds of funny things like mugs and shirts, things that in a way are kind of silly, but they keep it in front of you. And I think that's something to consider as well.
And then we also have things like this. And I don't know if we showed you this one last time.
Last week,
yeah. So, I mean, like you could have these. Oh, I don't know if you've seen I don't know if you've seen this.
Nice try to get that in there again.
I always try to get this in there. This is our little video. Nick, you've seen this, haven't you?
Oh, yes.
I actually introduced the concept to many executives in the Texas Hospital Association accidentally, as I shared with you.
I remember. I was so laughing about that.
Very familiar, as are several, wondering what the hell I was listening to.
I haven't heard this one either.
People can't get enough of this.
His theme, yes, his song.
Yes.
It's kind of like a rap.
Have you heard it? I don't think so. I haven't heard it. I was asleep or something.
Well, you definitely should hear. I won't play it for you now because I will get in trouble from somebody, and I won't say who, but her name rhymes with Schmelinda.
So it is in the blog. It is also in your resource library. So that's something. But I do want to
incorporate this into our skills fair. What's on? How can we incorporate this into like our skills fair? Okay. Yeah, the fun part of it. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, for the people that have taken it, that's the only caveat. I don't want to buy 200 tests.
No,
until we're ready to.
How could you just throw parts of it in though to kind of jazz up our, so that everybody kind of gets like, what's that?
I think that's a good thing to brainstorm, actually. Like, at what point, do you put up some visuals? Because if not everybody has taken it, but you kind of want to get them there, what would be the first thing you do? And I would actually kind of do things in stages for that reason exactly. So spend a little time having fun brainstorming that. I absolutely think that's part of the methods of the POM. So we're a little past our time. We can absolutely still stay. Adam and I do not, I'm speaking for Adam, but we're good to go.
Yeah, I'm good. Before you move on though, I want to say, if you're going to buy a bunch of codes, if you're interested, I actually have a bunch and I could probably give you like a 15% discount from what it would cost on Gallup. If, it's the same code, so
that sounds great. I mean, we will be buying some code. I think we kind of have our initial rollout, but it doesn't hurt us. I'm perpetually like, if we want to buy a few dozen or something, just to have them available. And then I was thinking in terms of the folks that would probably be the best to have access to this system in terms of like generating and I need a code, those kinds of things. I don't want things to bottleneck with Heather Tackard. And so I think it could be Heather and Pam would be the best people, because between the two of them, somebody could get what they need. And then Pam also could immediately offer those, making sure the structure, that they have a context around this code they're getting, whoever's asking for it.
Right. Kind of let them know what they're doing.
Right. But like starting tomorrow, we're not going to say like, hey, everybody go get codes, because at this point, the people in this room, we don't have the curriculum yet, but we are the ones that are going to start going like kind of one down. And then we'll be doing, as we said, maybe some of the mini LDI stuff for like the Marianas and the people that didn't do this, or the people with the LDI.
Yeah.
And then it will be fun and evolution for them to see sort of maybe this video series. Well, now that I've said that out loud, and forgive the ideation, do we want to wait to get kind of what they're talking about developed before we try to start taking a bunch of stuff to them? It might be better to
I
get
already
this from.
prefer to wait. I already made documents on the document generator. If you don't want me to do that anymore, I won't.
No, it's okay. I mean, you are where you are. I mean, I'm thinking it's kind of like, but most people aren't there, action oriented. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of my thought. But I don't want to slow you down. So if you're in a different place, like knock yourself out because your people are really getting into it. It would actually hurt their education if you were like, okay, I can't talk to you about this for 6 weeks.
Well, I just feel like I feel like they want more from me, and I'm not letting them down if I don't.
That's like the story of my life. But anyway, no, I get it.
Well, and I want to just interject there. It won't hurt them to have both. So if you go ahead and get them started hearing it from you, they're going to get a lot of personal application right off the bat. So, and then if they go back and watch the video series, it'll be a slightly different language. So it's okay to go ahead with that excitement, and it will be different. That's the nice.
I will stop, and because I actually wanted a structure because that's where I'm not so good. Because I'm like giving them all kinds of stuff, and then I'm like, okay, now what? So I do want a structure, but I just didn't know if you were saying for us not to get into the document generator ourselves and wait for Pam or Heather. Or,
no, I'm actually thinking about, and to be honest with you, I'm the type that's going to go play the document generator too, but I wasn't going to say that. So it's not to say, but when you start rolling this out in the organization, you do want some
structure, yes.
Just like when you were talking about rolling out the MyCare text, you weren't like, hey, everybody, just go get it. You were like, come through me, and I'll make sure that we're on the same page. And that's just how a big picture works. You're more than competent and capable. I think anyone in this room is, if they really feel strong about it, not to be slowed up. But we're talking about creating a sustainable program that is as important to us is in a different way, like CPR or any of the other modules that we teach and expect our employees to know.
Right.
So you want something that's kind of sort of standardized so that if Karen goes to manage Memorial Hermann, whoever comes in, if they know, oh, she was at step 5, this is where we're going to go.
And that's what they're going to make for us. And then we're going to follow it.
Yeah, I think because that's how we know we're rolling it out. Otherwise, it will live and die with this group.
Switch faith in this. We'll take it to our grave.
I love it.
I'm excited. And then, and then just kind of going back over some of the notes we had, like the takeaway objectives for each of the sessions is really important. That way we know we're hitting on those points. And then whatever the game exercise is that goes with that, and then the questions we want to ask from the videos. And I know this is more than us because this is something you guys can probably package and create for other organizations, but that's how I would think it was helpful. And then the 2 tracks. You've got it's fun and loving. Don't you guys love this? And then there's another second component, which is around you're a leader. How do you integrate this into your evaluations or into coaching or whatever?
I think that's great. In fact, the way I see it, tell me if you see it differently, would be everybody would take the foundation course, manager or frontline, and then there's a next level course like the strengths-based leader or manager or something like that.
Yeah, and then we may, and I love the evolution of it, I mean, we may decide like, oh my gosh, we really need like phase 2 of this. I don't know what that is.
Strengths-based team, strengths-based communication.
Exactly. And then, yes, and like the intervention piece, like if we're dealing with somebody that is like a hot mess or whatever, it might be helpful, like from a coaching standpoint, how do we deal with those people?
Strengths-based, fire their ass would be another course.
But like in terms of like getting through them, so maybe like, and I haven't read this sheet, the 3 pages you guys showed today, other than like the initial description that Belinda gave. But like if that, like how you intervene and maybe some exercises around that we could just direct them to. We could say, oh, check these exercises out, which may be repeats of some of the stuff in the foundation course, but it may be some more like, I'm talking to you about your inability to blah, 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 and you're not hearing me. So I want you to like apply your themes to these scenarios and you tell me how. So they're kind of doing the introspective thing.
Yeah, I think that would likely fall under the strength-based manager, that second level, because anybody who would be managing is probably going to need that at some point, unfortunately. But then maybe that would be a module, and then all the tools would live inside that. And then you could say, all right, you know, go to module or session 7 or whatever. That's where you're going to find, you know, the steps and the tools and the, you know, maybe even some downloads. Does that sound like that would be what you're speaking to? Okay. You said back on the foundations course, I was taking notes, takeaway objectives are sort of the learning outcomes, and then the activities. There was a third thing that you said you would like to see.
Question.
Just the questions from the videos.
Okay. Like,
I don't want to be like questions to make sure you watched it, because it sounds very like I don't trust you, but you know, in a fun way, like some takeaways specific to the video that spoke to you, whatever. That doesn't put too many words, but you know what I'm going.
yeah. Okay. Got it.
Like, what is Adam's drink that he always wants Nick to make for him?
For example.
When did Felinda cut her hair?
What video? Yeah.
How many times did Felinda reprimand Adam?
When did Belinda change the 3rd week on her set?
Yes.
When did the puppy come in?
Right.
Right.
That's great.
I love it. Well, I am not going to take you through those next 2 steps of the intervention because this is a lot for today, but it is in the download section, and I think we'll cover some of that next time. We were going to make this video for you for the next session, but I want to talk about if it is something you would find useful before we do it. So the next session is about sequencing, kind of the onboarding and recruiting and, you know, that process we had talked about the hiring process essentially, but it's a bit bigger in scope, and how to plug the Strengths Finder, you know, where does the Strengths Finder come into play there? That was going to be our next session, kind of the bulk of the content. Does that sound like something you would like for next time?
With me?
Okay, so we will make that video. Ideally, we'll have it posted tomorrow sometime. It may take an extra day, but we'll get that in the next session. So that'll be your homework to watch that video and do the strength thinking worksheet.
Yeah, just pick one activity where you'd like to see your performance improve and just follow it through step by step. Some of it might get tedious. You'll tell us if something was tedious or unhelpful. Just flag it, just put a little check next to it or something. But definitely just try to see it all the way through one of those, take an activity through all those steps and then see what you take from it. And we'll talk about it next week.
And then just another suggestion, when you insert like the actual team themes and things, those, I love the customization of it. The problem is like people come and go, and I think we've got in some of our presentations like teams you've worked with that we don't even know. And so you might leave those specific ones out only because it's more work for you to have to go back and customize those.
Yes, and actually that is exactly what I've been kind of working on, trying to make it as standalone as possible so that, you know, it's not boring like we were talking about, but that there isn't that level of customization inherent to the course, but that the participants then could take that material and go customize it with their teams. Like, okay, you know, go print the document, generator team report, here's what that is. Like they'll understand what those documents are, but that it won't be in the slides and in the things like that. So, well,
and in the toolbox, like Heather or Pam could keep like whatever the latest management team roster updated. Although it's not to say if you've done this exercise with people that work for you, I will never have a need to know what, I mean, it would be nice if we did have a central repository for when employees do take it, because there are going to be certain employees that you're just going to take it. And it would be kind of cool to have, if we're spending $20 to get them to, or whatever it is, minus 15%, to have them tell us, it'd be nice if I just had a record of that.
So
Well, that is your document generator.
Yes.
So
Yes,
once
you
it's
got it.
entered in, you can then go in and search an employee, pull up their top 5 individually. You can put them in a team, kind of how we have your team. And it's very easy to sort of uncheck somebody or add somebody to that. So that's why you all have one account, so that everybody in the organization is inside of it. But you can then start to break them into groups. We call them groups, but likely they're called teams where you are. That's
to create those. You have to first have them to make them
Yes.
in there.
So when
Yes.
they get their code, they have to submit their results back to us, and then we create a profile for that person and put them into a department.
And it's easy enough for you to move them to another department if they transfer.
I've
Yes.
not gotten that far yet, I don't know.
It's super
It is.
easy.
It
It-
You would just
and
do
we
the
can.
bottom.
Yep.
Okay.
I was going to say, who if you identify like 1 or 2 people who are the primary document generators users, we can go through and show them advanced ideas on it. So
Yeah, I feel like only a couple people probably will need the advanced, but there is a tutorial already in the T2S resources. So it's not a terribly complicated platform. So anyone really could get familiar with it pretty quickly. But what I do want you to have, so it's nice that 1 or 2 people are going to be kind of like, gatekeepers a little bit. But every single one of you can use that username and login. If you're just curious and you want to look somebody up, or you have a need to have that person's report, we do this all the time. We'll go into an account, we'll log in. Okay, what's that person's top 5? I have a meeting with them in 5 minutes. Let me just take a quick look. It's great for people you're going to have that whole organization eventually in there. So you'll be able to quickly find a person you're not already familiar with, or even a team. Let's say you're giving some kind of presentation to a team. You want to see who's in the room. Pull up their team report, take a look. So it's something we created because we needed it. Really, Adam did, and we refined it since then. And it's been so useful for that reason, to have that centralized resource. Like, okay, someone's left and moved to another team. Uncheck this box, check this one. New team report, updated. So. But I want all of you to be able to know you can go in there and look. So.
Anything else, guys?
We're good on our end. We're happy to stay longer if you have questions or comments. But if not, we can. Are we meeting next week? I think we are not meeting next week, but the one after. Is that correct?
I think you're correct.
correct.
Okay. Well,
Next week would be the 17th, and
That's
no, we are not meeting.
Right.
And
Okay.
then the following week, we are meeting on the 24th.
yes.
Now,
Oh.
and I
Well,
made
that's great. That'll give you a little bit of extra time to kind of play with that worksheet too, and reach out to us if you have any questions. So you want to.
Yeah, I would actually say if you guys want to make the homework this week, do the worksheet. Next week, we'll have a video up for you by then, but we will have it sooner, but save that for next week. That gives us I'm trying to buy us a little time to on that video. So it works out great. Guys, it's awesome seeing you, and this was a lot of fun to talk through like the application of it. This is meaty stuff, but this is the payoff. This is where StrengthsFinder really has legs and becomes powerful. So we're really excited and seeing what you guys think of this. Not next week, the week after.
And if you don't mind, I know it's gonna be a few days before you get the video up, and I know Philinda loves to do this because you did such a good job last time. Do you mind emailing us when the video's up? That way we don't forget to go.
Yeah, just wait for us to send an email. We'll send it to Heather, and she can send it out to the team if she feels like telling you guys.
Thank you. Y'all did a fantastic job. We appreciate it. And we're really excited about the content. So I'm glad that the conversation naturally went there. Like, apologize for waiting to respond to you guys, but I wanted to kind of see what the team was. I didn't want
It's great. Yeah.
to have everybody on this fantasy quest that only I'm excited about. So
I think that's so smart. And also, I don't know. One of my hopes is that it's not just learning about the themes, but it humanizes and maybe as a result of this process, even within just your group, or maybe maybe within your teams, if you're using it with your teams, that you're just feeling kind of like the walls come down a little bit, or the interpersonal surface areas a little bit more out, connected. And I don't know, that's kind of the hopes that I have for this. I love Strengths StrengthsFinder, but it's just the effect on people that really is what is satisfying.
I want to see them get excited.
And then, not for the purpose of the recording the class, but question, you have a lot of theories on what Clifton was thinking, or what you felt like his intention was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you never got to meet him, right?
I never got to meet him, no.
I didn't know if you'd read more, because you know a lot about this guy.
I'm kind of been stalking him, even though he's not alive. I stalk him, I guess. Felinda found me an obscure audio recording of him from 1996 that I wanted, and that was like a birthday present she gave me, like total birthday present.
Which was so, that would explain how into this Adam is. That was like a good birthday present.
Yeah.
But it's an interview he did for NPR. I believe I put it up in the resources, so I believe it's in there still. If it's not, I can put it back. But
is that the one you had said you first heard him at, and you pulled over and wrote the stuff down?
Wow, you remembered. That's great. Yeah, that's the one.
I'm not stalking you, but
no, it's great. It's nice that somebody pays attention to me. Actually, I'm not used to it.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, good. Have some orange vodka on me, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
thank you. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.